Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to another exciting virtual tour. I'm your guide for the evening, Chris Stodinger, here with Pretty Gritty Tours in historic Tacoma. And so far, everything looks like a green light, which is very exciting. If you were here for our earlier tour today, then you probably got to catch the majority of what was, I think, a really exciting and cool tour of the Proctor Neighborhood until we got our first virtual attack, which is one for the record books for me. We've had hecklers on live tours. I've been in a torrential downpour. We went through the great smoky wildfires of yesteryear. All of these things we've endured. So this is another one for the little trophy box. I'm pretty excited about it. And frankly, I'm more thrilled and delighted than anything by all of you. You have stood by us all through some pretty exciting stuff, so thanks for giving us another chance tonight. Huge thank you, just across the board, to Historic Tacoma. So this is their project. They have been out doing just extensive amounts of research for all of Tacoma, but in particular the Proctor Neighborhood. And several of the places that we're going to talk about tonight are eligible for historic preservation. And that is really tremendous because Proctor Neighborhood is one that is in flux. It is a historic and important central neighborhood right in the very heart of Tacoma that has gone under probably some of the most aggressive changes and developments in the city of Tacoma. And so now more than ever is an opportunity to really recognize the story of how this neighborhood came into being and take this opportunity to save some of those historic structures and continue their legacy on. So Historic Tacoma, you can look them up at historictacoma.org, is doing all of this fantastic research. I use them frequently for just the vast amounts of historic research that we have to do as a tour company in the city of Tacoma. And they're doing tremendous, tremendous stuff. So it was a delight and a privilege to be invited by them to lead this virtual tour through Tacoma in the Proctor Neighborhood, and we're happy to do it. It's also part of the broader Historic Preservation Month. Every month of May for the City of Tacoma is Historic Preservation Month. So the City of Tacoma's Historic Preservation Office leads all these different experiences and partners with people like us or Historic Tacoma or the Job Carr Museum, so on and so forth, to really not just preserve, but to engage the community with the history that's out there, to let them know their own story, which, I mean, what's better than that? Knowing your own story is one of the most important things you could possibly do. So, are you guys ready? Shall we try this again? It's good to see you all right now. For all of you who are just tuning in right now, we attempted to do the full-length tour this afternoon. It got cyber attacked by what I'm assuming are some very technically adept middle schoolers, and then we had to abandon the project temporarily and then come back online. And so the debate was, how do we do that? And I tried to be very professional and smooth throughout the entire operation, so I'm hoping that it didn't seem too strange at the end there. But here we are. Good to see you all again. Welcome. So let's take a virtual tour of the Proctor Neighborhood, and you guys can see everything that you got to see today and hopefully more, because we are starting tonight at the Wheelock Library. And let's see if I can switch to our map view here really quick. Seems to we've done all this before. We can make it happen again. The not popping up here. So the Wheelock Library used to be the McCormick Library. It is central downtown in the Proctor district here, and when you're down there, you get to see this Alan C. Mason statue, and Mason is pivotal to Tacoma, really, but also very much to the Proctor district. Boop, 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 boop. Here we go. So here's our interactive map that we get to. I love that they blurred the face of Mason there. This is where we would have met if this was an in-person walking tour. And a couple things that I'd like to point out here. First of all, Alan C. Mason's statue was a late addition to the neighborhood, as is the 5-foot diameter bronze Star of Destiny installed in the street corner there. The columns behind Mason there are original to Mason's mansion. The McCormick Library in the back there is from 1927. It is now known as the Wheelock Library. And the oak, that gorgeous oak behind Mason and in front of the library, is just over 100 years old and is one of the longest standing members of this entire community. So let's give you guys some backstory on everything so that you're situated in the moment. If you're not from the Tacoma area and you're not familiar with Proctor, the neighborhood is centrally located. It's in the northern Tacoma region. It's on Proctor Street and 26th, and it's right in the middle of the action. And it is a combination of sort of suburban residential dwellings and then major sort of economic commerce development hub. Small businesses, and it's always been pitched towards the community. So it's not like a downtown Pacific Avenue vibe. It's like businesses of the community for the community, and it's always had that sort of essence to it. If you are from Tacoma and you're familiar with Bus Route 11, then you are experiencing the true Proctor feeling, because when Alan C. Mason, patron saint of Tacoma, sort of established everything out there, the first streetcars that went in followed what is now Bus Route 11. So Point Defiance Park, downtown Tacoma, Wright Park, and Proctor were all connected by that central streetcar line. Now, if you don't know Alan Mason, then you probably haven't attended one of our other virtual or in-person tours, because he's the guy I talk about all the time. But Alan Mason left the Midwest, where he was a school teacher. He arrived to the densely forested area of Tacoma and is responsible for giving it the term City of Destiny. He just conjured this image of a fantastic city in his mind and then went full bore with it. He established, here he is, good-looking dude right here, the Star of Destiny. So this is the original advertisement that you're looking at here. It is a map of the Puget Sound with Tacoma, the radiant star of hope and commerce, right there in the middle. And each of those lines that radiates out from the star is something cool about Tacoma. So it's like close to the water, fresh air, on a rail line, lots of money, all your dreams come true, whatever. Each of these things was something cool about Tacoma, and he spent tens of thousands of dollars to have this printed in newspapers on the East Coast, sort of like enticing people to come settle in the area. And meanwhile, he was developing a ton of real estate here. So as soon as people arrived, he was like, by the way, would you like to buy a house? I have several fine ones right here. Not only was he enticing people to settle and building homes, he was also really developing the infrastructure of the area. So the first library of Tacoma was Alan C. Mason's. One of the best and grandest mansions in the area, Alan C. Mason's. The streetcar that connected the entire city, that was his economic development. And in fact, the trestle bridge that connected North Tacoma to the Stadium District, that was his design and bankrolled project as well. So he was putting his money where his mouth was again and again. And in my favorite story of the guy, he promised at the beginning of the economic fallout that rocked the nation that anyone who couldn't afford their mortgage, he would personally buy back the homes that he had sold them. And he did so. He stuck true to his word, and he ends up losing his entire fortune buying back homes from people who could no longer afford them. So much so that eventually he has to sell his own mansion, and it gets demolished when the Weyerhaeuser timber barons move into the area and claim that spot for their own. So those 6 columns behind the statue of Alan C. Mason are the only part of his mansion and in a lot of ways, legacy that remain today. The other parts that we see that we really get to interact with are the things that he developed for the community, like infrastructure and roads, and the feeling that we really are the city of destiny. So it's not just Mason that develops it, and I see this popping up down here in the comments. Why is it called Proctor if Mason was such an influential guy to the whole thing? Well, John G. Proctor is our boy who eventually arrives and really helps develop it as an architect. And a lot of big projects like Western State Mental Hospital and the Pierce County Courthouse that eventually was destroyed are Proctor projects. And when the city engineers were developing everything, they eventually connected Jefferson and Esther Street. And instead of just calling it longer Esther Street, they were like, we need a new name for it. And so they named it after Proctor, who had built his house on the southern end of that main arterial down in South Tacoma. So that was the beginning of it. Proctor Street now ran through the neighborhood, but John Proctor didn't just stop his career as a sweet architect. He then went on to be a city council member and really devoted his time and effort to creating a community and a strong neighborhood in the area. So in his honor, the Proctor neighborhood was named after him. Long story, truncated as much as I possibly could with that. The library itself, behind Alan Mason back there, the Wheelock Library, is a testament to everything as well, because when Alan Mason lost his fortune, that first public library that was free went with him. And the community were like, well, we really want a library. We don't have any funds for it from the city. Let's see if we can raise it ourselves. And so that neighborhood managed to raise about $3,100 to create a public library in the area, and it wasn't even nearly enough. So Anna McCormick, widow of the Secretary of the Warehouse or Timber Industry Empire, if you will, stepped up and was like, listen, I love this community. It's important that you're all smart, specifically the kids. Here's $25,000. Build a library. And they did. So the first library was called the McCormick Library in her honor. And then over the years, up into the 90s, when eventually it needed to be remodeled and refurbished, the community was like, shoots, we really need money for this again. And so a community member who had long been there, a patron of the library, a Ms. McCormick, Wheelock, showed up and was like, here's $2.4 million. It's important to me as well that you're all smart, and I give this to you under one condition, that you name it in honor of my mother, Anna Lemon Wheelock. So the McCormick Library now becomes the Wheelock Library. A great deal of refurbishment and remodeling goes into it, but maintaining that historic integrity of it, and thus the people of Proctor remain well-read and edified. Whew. I think that's a pretty good entrance to our story of the Proctor neighborhood. If you guys have questions, or you feel that I've left anything out, put them in the comments below, because for me, one of the most valuable and worthwhile parts of all of these virtual tours is all of you. Whenever we do these free walking tours for the city, my favorite part is just getting to harvest the cool stories that people show up with. Because I find that a lot of people come on these tours not necessarily to learn anything new, but to share or to just revel in the nostalgia of their own lives. And I've got to meet some truly extraordinary key players in the city of Tacoma by doing these. And it's one of my great honors. So if you guys have memories that you want to share, put them in the comments. Let me catalog these and share your story forever and always. Which is now an excellent opportunity for any of you who are from the Proctor neighborhood to reminisce a little bit, because if anyone went to Washington School right across the street from the library there, I would love to hear it. You are probably already familiar with Frederick Heath. He's the architect of Tacoma who's most famous for finishing Stadium High School and building the adjacent Stadium Bowl. And one of his projects that he envisioned and then completed from start to finish is Washington School here. It's still right there. It is historically preserved and intact, so it's not in danger. But a lot of places in the Proctor neighborhood still are, so we want to use this as a focal point of what can be done. If you're curious, however, which places are up or in danger, under the historictacoma.org website, they actually have a website that shows sites that are on the radar or sites that are in danger of being destroyed, and then actually sort of a victory list of sites that they've helped save through historic preservation. And a big part of this project right now is advancing that cause. A lot of the places in Proctor that we get to look at are in danger because their story has been forgotten. Sort of a never-ending story situation. As soon as you forget it, it's destroyed by the nothing. Whew. Topical 1980s reference. I think the most visceral and vivid example of that is actually the Coleman house. So I'm going to take you guys back to the map here really quick because it gives us an... Oh, here. I'm actually going to put the website in the comments really quick here. There you go. historictacoma.org. They are the people responsible for this tour tonight. Their logo is, oh, that's tricky, right down there in the corner. If you have questions about the history of Tacoma, they're a invaluable resource. So historictacoma.org, and they do have that watch list on there, which we get to see here in a second. So when we're doing the flyout of the map here, we're going to leave the Wheelock Library right there on the corner, Washington Elementary right down here, looking gorgeous as always. I'm going to take you guys down to Chalet Bowl here in a second, and then past Manny's and Pinks and Pints. But right down here where Yasminka Retail is, if you can see in the back of that building, right there in the middle, it looks like this shabby little house. And we're going to take you digitally down into the alley here so that you can see it. Now, unfortunately, this structure has been lost. There was a flash in the pan, a dedicated effort to try and save it, and unfortunately it couldn't happen, which is too bad because the coal house here dates back to 1905. And it was the oldest structure still existing in the Proctor neighborhood at 1905. You know, it was over 115 years old. And really just an extraordinary place until very recently it was destroyed. And I've got some photos for it that I want you guys to see because while we don't have it anymore, it's still important to remember it. So here it is, 1905, when it was first built, and then existed as a personal residence until about 1912, and it was built by a guy named Michael Coleman, which is the same guy who's responsible for the Coleman building, which is at 3822 North 26th. And that's actually the first commercial building in the Proctor neighborhood. And what you're looking at here is the Sanborn fire insurance map, which for me is one of the most detailed and accurate records of architecture throughout the city of Tacoma, and is a really good resource. You can find that online as well. I'll put the link up for it in a second. But this home was really important to the community for a lot of different reasons over the years. It was at one point a place called Martin's Barber Shop. I'll let you try and guess what that was. That was in, I think, 1928. It had a variety of beauty salons and barbershops in it, a shoe repair facility, and the primary entrance was always right back here in the alley. And it was just it's like a 1.5 story building. You can see the original wood peeking through the facade that they added later on in its career, and it was exemplary of the Proctor neighborhood because it was a small, locally owned, family-run business throughout its entire career. And as you can see from the watch list here, it was a building that was on the radar, then threatened, and unfortunately it's now represented by that black dot saying that it has been lost. A permit for its demolition was issued, I believe, last year, and it's no longer around. So there is a couple moments of tragedy in our tour tonight, and that's the first of them. So I'm going to try and uplift you guys a little bit more by taking you back to the map and telling you about one of the coolest parts of the Proctor neighborhood, and certainly one of the most extraordinary to still exist out there today. Dropping us down. I love doing the virtual tours because it's like we can go anywhere that our mind can imagine tonight. Welcome to Chalet Bowl. Now, if anyone's been in the Proctor district for any period of time, you're probably very familiar with Chalet Bowl. Some of you might even be familiar with the original institution, North End Alleys. North End Alleys, and then later Chalet Bowl. This is the oldest continuously running bowling alley in the state of Washington. North End Alleys was originally built in 1941 and then continued to operate as that entity until 1984, and then ended up getting converted by the Frederick family into Chalet Bowl. They modernized it a little bit, but kept a lot of that sort of vintage charm to it. And today it is now a family-owned and operated bowling alley, as it once and always was, which is so sweet that Proctor has this. And this is a place that is definitely worth preserving. So you can see from the facade that it doesn't necessarily look like the oldest continually operating bowling alley in the state of Washington. If anyone has been to Holden Village in the Cascades, they have what looks like the oldest continuously operating bowling alley in the state of Washington. It's this little like 2-lane enterprise run by good-natured Lutherans out in the hinterlands. And it's one of those ones where you have to put the pins in the machine and someone has to like crank it like an old pin boy from the 1930s. Pretty sweet. But I'm proud to announce that Chalet Bowl has all the historic charm without any of the antiquity that you would be expecting from that. So it's still fun to bowl, and you don't have to make your children do any of the heavy lifting. Right next door to it, though, is another place that is beloved by the community and with good cause. So if we come down here, sound effects by yours truly. Manny's, straight ahead, is this strange-looking low brick building with the wide glass front and then the gabled roof up there. And what's bananas is that is all original. This was first constructed in 1912, and it's debated what the original intention was. Possibly a house. A sharp gable like that is usually indicative of a house. But we do know that the first commercial enterprise inside was a Long's Dry Goods. And then that operated until 1921. Then for a period of time, it was a Cubit bakery, but far and away, the most beloved enterprise inside was Henry's Bakery. And I don't think I've heard people speak more lovingly and tenderly about any topic in Tacoma than I have heard them speak about donuts. I think it is the most controversial topic in the city, and certainly the one that gets people's hackles up instantly. What is the best donut in Tacoma? I have a personal opinion. I'm not going to weigh in on it because it's like talking about politics at Thanksgiving. I just don't do it. But Henry's has what people have claimed to have been the finest maple bar in the city of Tacoma. People from various decades throughout these different tours have come to me and been like, Henry's, that was the maple bar. Like, that was the superlative maple bar, full stop. So I can't speak to the authenticity of that, but I am honor bound to remind you that at one point in the building that bears Manny's name on the front there, that was at one point perhaps the finest maple bar in the city of Tacoma. Right next door is another historically important building, not just because it houses currently Peaks and Pints and Julie's Hair Care on the upper level there. This was originally built by G.R. Hugenin out of Portland, and it was built for the McKinnell brothers to operate as a movie theater. That was really early on. It operated as the Paramount until 1933, after which it was vacant for a period of time, and then it was a Sherfy's variety store. And then from 1953 to 1983, it was the Proctor 10-cent store. And I've got a sweet picture for you guys here of it as the Paramount there. And you can see if we flip back and forth of them. Peaks and Pints to Paramount, not a lot has been altered with this building. One of the biggest changes is this dainty little tree out front. And it's a 2-story, 4-bay commercial building. And it is up for historic preservation. When Peaks and Pints and the rad dudes who are also behind 1111 in Hilltop took over this building, it actually had a lot of that original theater seating still installed in it, and it was at a rake, at an incline. So they had to even the floor out, and I believe, though I haven't confirmed it yet, the operation that they chose was to just put even flooring over a lot of the seating. So some of that original theater seating is allegedly still preserved under the ground there. If anyone can confirm that for me, please let me know. You know my deep, undivided passion for discovering the subterranean spaces of Tacoma. But regardless of all of that, Peaks and Pints is just a sweet local establishment that has perhaps, I'm going to confirm this, but I think the most extraordinarily wide selection of beers there and just really solid food. So they're doing curbside pickup right now. You should definitely check them out. And then as soon as pandemic is over, go down, because we're all going to need a drink. It's an evening tour. I can drink now. So let's continue down the street, shall we? I have a few more sweet things I want to show you guys down here. Right next door, it hurts me every time we get here, but I want to have a moment of silence for Backstage Video. Okay. Backstage Video was, up until very recently, when they unfortunately closed their doors for good, the location where you would go to find something if it wasn't on Netflix or Amazon Prime or Redbox. Like, there was just an in-person collection of VHS and DVD, and if you were looking for a film that was important to you, there was never a time that I went there and they didn't have what I was looking for. Every single time, they were always there. The building itself is historic beyond just the fact that it was the finest video store in the area for a period of time. It was built in 1925. We're not really sure what the earliest occupants of that building were, but we do know that it was a Safeway grocer for a brief period of time there in the early 1930s. And then, most famously, it was the Proctor Pharmacy, which, let's see if I've got my, here we go. So Proctor Pharmacy operated for a long period of time and was the passion project of Wilmot Ragsdale, who lived in the Proctor district for 40 years after leaving his home state of Iowa. He moved there and then worked those last 40 years of his life in the Proctor Pharmacy the entire time. Right as he sold it, that was when he was like, and that was it. He passed at 71. If you haven't been down to the Proctor district in a long period of time, they have all these cool plaques installed in the sidewalks out there. So if you have any interest in leading a self-guided tour down there, or you just want a little taste of the history, a lot of these really cool plaques are installed there. And so this one is right in front of what used to be Backstage Video, formerly Proctor Pharmacy and Drugs, and it's right downtown there on 26th. And yeah, Nelson Drugs. So let me take you guys, we're going to go back to the map really quick, and we're going to continue our slow crawl. There's so much of the exciting history right there on 26, and then we're going to hook to the right and go down Proctor, and there's a ton of cool stuff down there. So buckle up, my friends. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Take you guys back to the map really quick. So immediately next door to Backstage Video, this is Yasminka. This is that retail clothing store, which you could see when we fly out. The back section of was the Coleman House, the oldest building in the area from 1905. Immediately behind that, for any of you who are familiar, yes, Metropolitan Market, which when we do walking tours is like one of people's favorite places to go. I perhaps take it for granted, but yeah, the Metropolitan Market is super cool. Whoa! We have traveled through time, my friends. Apparently, Google hasn't updated their 360 of this corner since 1992. What is going on over here? I don't know if we just flew through the air in a DeLorean, but this is wild. Okay, well, good. Now you really get to see some historic look at the area. Immediately in front of us is certainly one of my kids' favorite places to go. This is Firehouse 13. And this was definitely one of the older parts of the area. This was first established in 1911. Guess what? The 13th firehouse in the area. And you can see when we switch back to the map here, it is pretty much exactly the way it always was. Oh, isn't that crazy to fly through time like that? Man, next time someone wants to play around on Google Map, go to the corner of Proctor and 25th here, and you can really jump through time. It does have the Dalmatian salmon, which is there on the side. There's a series of salmon sculptures throughout the city of Tacoma, and delightfully, the Dalmatian one is outside the firehouse. I'll switch you guys back to the historic photo here. Firehouse 13 has continued to serve its capacity as a firehouse. It's had some renovations done to it to make it more up to code as a fire institution, but it has always been a firehouse here in the city of Tacoma. It is on the historic registrar and is a preserved building, so if anyone's worried about losing this one, don't. It is okay. Back to the map really quick so we can fly through space and time. I'm going to take you guys down Proctor Street here and take you, we were on 26th, so we were just right down here. We're actually going to go back down the street there in a second to where that pink sign is peeking out from behind the trees where Envy is, but to sort of situate you in the area, I want to give you guys some history on this. Directly in front of you is the UPS store and Blue is like an upscale Goodwill. It's an interesting situation, but that one on the corner has operated as a variety of things over time, and I've got the picture here for you really quick. Where are you? That's not it. All my photos got skewed around here. Okay, so this was a series of grocers. In 1910, this was the Maclean Brothers Grocery. In the 1930s, it was a Safeway. By the 1940s, it was a Hogan's Grocery. It had a brief period of time where it was a Piggly Wiggly, and then most recently, before becoming the UPS store, it was an Ambrosia Florist, which they're just a couple houses or doors down, because that entire grocery facility ends up getting sectioned up into smaller portions and then farmed out to a variety of small businesses down there. You can see the most contested part of the area with this giant apartment complex directly in front of you. And when I was talking about the need for historic preservation, this is one of the hot button parts of the Proctor neighborhood, is that it is developing. It's becoming an area that more and more people are inhabiting, and as they do so, high-rises like this go into it, and there's a debate as to how much of the historic character of the neighborhood is being eroded. Aries the cat has joined us for the remainder of our tour, so I'm sure everyone's very excited to see him. When we go back to the map, I'm going to take you guys across the street to where the Starbucks is really quick, because I want to show you Viva. And Viva, right down there in the corner, has a cool history to it, where the space that it now occupies used to be filled by this building right here in front of you. This was originally home to the Harry Allard Jr. photography studio, and then in 1947 it became another photography studio before eventually reaching, I think, its most popular tenant. In the 1960s, it became the Lang and Denison Hardware Building. And the best historic photographs of it are from Lang and Denison's hardware facility, pictured right here, as well as right here. And it was a popular spot for a Proctor native, a man named Harry Stewart. Now, Harry Stewart is one of the guys that I love to highlight when we talk about Proctor, because he has a ton of national fame. He's certainly one of the most famous characters to come out of Tacoma. And weirdly, his story is being forgotten. So here we are, preserving his narrative tonight. So Harry Stewart is better known by his nom de plume, his stage name, Yogi Jorgensen. Anyone who grew up Lutheran has probably heard his Christmas album, and he was this guy who eventually is actually credited with doing the inspiration for Carson's Karnak, and he would do this Swedish accent and then have like an upturned fishbowl that he used as a crystal ball, and he would answer audience questions. He was on the radio, he would do stage performances, and he always did this like over-the-top Swedish accent for his stuff, including his Christmas albums. If you're having a hard time envisioning it, don't you worry, my friends. I am not the kind of guy who would leave you to just wonder. Here is the clip of Yogi Jorgensen's popular stage performance, Pooped Out.
Upon a time I gave the girls the eye. Now I'd rather have another piece of pie. When I danced with girls I used to yelp and shout. Now I sit and watch because I'm all pooped out. I loved all the girls, but that was years ago. Every night I used to dream of Clairvaux. Now I dream of pig's feet and of sauerkraut. When you dream of food, it means you're all pooped out. Underneath the moon, I used to nearly swoon when I would smell the odor of my girl's perfume. Now a girl's cologne leaves me cold as stone. But how I love the food smell in the dining room. I can dance the polka like a jumping jack. That's what loosened up my sacroiliac. Now instead of dancing I just dream about all the things I did before I got pooped out.
So that is, that's the best example of Yogi Jorgensen that you can really get. I do believe that's from the Lawrence Welk show back in the early 1930s. Yogi's highlight career was 1920s and 1930s, and that's prime example of what you get. I find him hilarious. I don't know if that's my upbringing or a failing of my own, but I still think he's withstood the test of time. He was born on Fox Island, just on the other side of the Narrows. Unfortunately, there was an accident in his family, and he ends up getting adopted and then raised in the Proctor neighborhood, where he attended Washington Elementary. He later graduated from Stadium High School, and then he would always come back to Tacoma and perform because he had such a great affection for the city. In fact, we have this sweet photo of him in the Proctor neighborhood, just creating random concoctions for an unnamed druggist in the area. This is our boy telling fortunes and handing unspeakable concoctions to the people in the area. Good man. Just YouTube him. Just Yogi Jorgensen. Look him up. His Christmas albums are really fantastic stuff. But he is not the only super famous character from the area. Not only Anna McCormick just shelling out thousands of dollars in the early 1900s, or Ms. Wheelock preserving literacy of children throughout the area. Obviously, Mr. Proctor, John G. Proctor, famed architect of the Tacoma area, city council member, has ties to the area. Alan C. Mason, who donates Puget Park to the city of Tacoma and is influential in the city car line and the infrastructure of the whole area. Lots of cool people. But perhaps, very sincerely, none more loved by me than Sonny Johnson. This young man right here is a Proctor native. Here he is pictured in 1938 at the tender age of 13, already a lethal archer. Sonny Johnson here, Sonny Johns, is a record holder because this was taken right after winning the junior archery championship in Tacoma. He was such a deadeye that the Tacoma Chamber of Commerce got together and was like, here's some money, go make us proud. So he actually went on to the junior champion in Portland, which was a world competition at the time, and he won it. He brought the trophy home, and in fact, he shot 3 perfects, dead center on the target there. I'm not sure from what distance, but I'm sure it was several yards away. And 3 perfects is a feat that had not yet been achieved in any previous world archery competition, which seems impossible, but our boy Sonny there, Proctor, born and raised, lethal. Unfortunately, I don't know if he went on to pursue his archery career, but from that steely gaze in his eyes, I have to assume he was an accomplished hunter and at least just a sweet dude for the rest of his life. Anyone who can wear their pants like that, with that many trophies, and just be steely-eyed the whole time, you know he's a cool dude. So yeah, Sonny Johns, Yogi Jorgensen, perhaps 2 of the most famous and influential members of the Proctor community. May they never, ever be forgotten. But I digress. Let's take you guys back to the map. We're going to do a little more tour of the area because I want you to see some of the perhaps lesser known structures like Firehouse 13 or Engine House 13, Chalet Bowl, the Wheelock Library, Washington Elementary. These are all ones that stand out because of the extraordinary grandeur of their architecture. You can even make the case for the Peaks and Pints Paramount Theater building. But some of these, like the Coleman House, that have the longest standing legacy in the area, are easily forgotten by people, and I think that is unacceptable. So to the map! We're going to fly back down really quick here, out from Viva, and cruise down here onto 27th across from the post office. So right across the street from the post office are 2 of the most unassuming houses that you could possibly come up with in your mind. The first one here, 3808 North 27th, was built by Roscoe Steer. He was a real estate tycoon and a Christian Scientist healer, interestingly enough. And he and his wife Cora lived on 25th for a long period of time. And then this particular structure was built in 1912 and then had a family living in it for a long period of time. And the guy who lived there most notably, I think, was Eber Maxfield, an electrician with City Life, and he was there from the 1920s until the 1940s. Let's see here. There's a whole list of people that were living in that particular house. It's the one right ahead with the blue door. Right next door to it is another sweet historic structure right there at 3810. And this is also on North 27th. This was Blooming Kids, which a lot of you might have been familiar with if you were in the Tacoma area. They were a consignment shop that specialized in children's clothing and toys, and they were so philanthropic and important in the community. And unfortunately, a fire destroyed the business and the structure. So if you were to visit this spot today, if we were on the walking tour in real life right now, you wouldn't be able to see this structure. It's unfortunately gone. But it was built in 1910 and was one of the more, it had just such a rich character to it, and so many of the pivotal figures of the Proctor District and the story of Tacoma once lived there. And it had the distinct pleasure of being next door to this fine establishment, the Academy of Steve Karan Karate. Also, let's see if I can take you guys down to the corner here so that you can see Playback Sports, Fuzzy Wuzzy Rug Cleaning, and New Era Cleaning and Laundry, which is important to our story here in a second. I'm trying to see if I've got the important one for you guys here really quick. Okay, so we'll stick with this one right here. So this particular building is important because it was one of the first, or I guess the second commercial building in the area, and New Era Cleaning and Laundry is a three-pronged enterprise that operated in Tacoma. The founders of New Era Cleaning lived in the Proctor District. This was the first shop they established, and it still exists today. It's family-owned and operated, but not by the original family, sadly enough. But to have that piece of historic Tacoma, to play on words for you, it's really cool just to have it still down there and to be able to see a business that's existed for that long. We'll put some photos up on the Facebook page later of New Era's operations throughout Tacoma, but they were doing really cool stuff, and as the name implies, it was like space-age technology. I mean, you don't have to wash everything on a board and a bucket. This is astounding. So it really revolutionized the way that Tacoma cleaned their dirty laundry, so to speak. I want to take you guys down the street here really quick because I want to show you Mason Methodist. So Mason Methodist here is located in the district today. This is what it would have looked like originally. This is not what it still looks like today. Times have changed. The original building was consigned and then named for Alan C. Mason, the man that we were speaking about at the early part of this tour, the visionary of Tacoma. And then it needed a series of repairs. So in the 1960s, a famous architect out of Seattle was brought down for the project. And this is the building as you would see it today. Still a Methodist church, still named for Mason, but updated. And one of the extraordinary things that they did, other than adding this massive vaulted sanctuary here, was to do the long strips of narrow stained glass in there, which is very 60s, as a good time capsule of what was going on in the area. It is also, if we can take you guys, make sure I've got the right photo here before I say anything wrong to you, was built along with this mansion, which is just down the street from this one. So this is 4022 North 28. The Mason Methodist Parsonage was 14 years after the church, which was built in 1924, and was just down the street. This is another Frederick Heath design right here. It's a massive building, and I actually don't know how many square feet it is, but it's a lot. This is a private residence currently, but was built to house the clergy for a period of time just down the street from Mason's Methodist. We're going to take you back to the map, and I want to take you guys to one of the more eye-catching buildings in the area. Aren't you glad we don't have to walk like this. Whoop, 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 whoop. Here, we can just fly around. So easy. So the U.S. Bank branch is this round building right here. This is what it looks like today. Not a ton has changed on that. And if I can find it in my photo deck right here. Let's see. Oh, this is going to be a tricky one for me, which is really unfortunate. Okay. I'm going to find the historic photos of this one while you're looking at this right now. But the round building there, this has always been a bank building. I'm going to fly out so you can get the full appeal of that round building there. This was designed by a local architect, Harris, out of the Reed and Wilson firm. And a lot of people assumed that this was an Allen Little design. Allen Little was a Stadium High School graduate and sort of futuristic architect who did a lot of plywood rounded corners and designs like this one. But this was also exemplary of the 1960s design. And for whatever reason, there was just a period in the 60s where suburban banks had a design like this. So this is a vintage 1960s bank, definitely one of my favorites. I'll put the historic photos up on our Facebook page, but what I love so much about this is the glass underlayer. Like, it has offices up top there, but the entry's got this cool rain cover that extends out into the parking lot. And then the lower level just lets in all of this light, which I personally feel is something that we could be doing a lot more of with modern architecture. I love to just have tons of natural light streaming into a place like that. I want to take you back down 26th briefly. I'm just going to touch base with you guys really quick and make sure I'm not missing any of the sweet comments down here. Yeah, some people are denoting the fact that it might have been a long walk. And you never know with the free walking tours. We always get like a fun, either like scorching sun or torrential downpours, and we weather through all of it. I refuse to quit. But this definitely makes it a little easier for some people. So I'm hoping that we can continue this exciting use of virtual tour technology on our career as we move forward, even once we start doing live tours again. But again, huge thank you to Historic Tacoma for compiling all of the research on Proctor and then coming forward and being like, we want to do this tour. How can we facilitate that? And I instantly jumped on the project. I was like, yes, let's do it. So taking you back down 26 here, we're going to continue down basically to where we started, not hit that woman as we cross the street. And right here, if you can see Envy Retail has the pink sign peeking out from behind back there. And this is one of my favorite areas as far as historic photos. Let's see if I can bring it up for you guys here really quick. So it was the Harrington Grocery Building originally. And that was from like early, probably 1922, I think, until just about 1930s, like 1928. And then it became the Diedrich Delicatessen. And then the Depression hit it hard. It was vacant, empty, nothing was going on in there until it was populated in 1949 by perhaps the most beloved area other than Henry's Bakery. It was the Proctor Ice Creamery. Pictured here are all of the Proctor youth drinking in this moment. You can get a feel for the 1960s Proctor area, and this was no longer a part of the streetcar line. They abandoned that in 1938, but the automobile was now king on 26, and so people would cruise up and down. They'd go to the malt shop, get a sweet ice cream. I'm saying this all as if it was something that I was doing casually on a Friday night. I've been using the Michael Sullivan, famed historian, history keeper of Tacoma quote recently that history is a story of something that didn't happen, told by someone who wasn't there. I think that's particularly delightful and very, very true. I have a tendency to interject myself into these historic anecdotes as if going to the ice creamery in Proctor was my favorite thing to do to pick up chicks, which we all know, not the case. not the case. I was down in Parkland at PLU doing that. So we're going to take you guys now around the corner because I had the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Yogi Jorgensen, also Sonny John, but I really want to show you the story of one of my favorite members of the Proctor community whose name is on one of the buildings today. Let's cruise down the corner here, and I'm going to take you to the Gamble building. Also, just a heads up, if anyone hasn't been to Compass Rose yet, the fine artisan shop pictured here, they are just the best. Like, if you're looking for a last-minute anniversary gift, not that I have ever waited to the last minute to get an anniversary gift, but that's the spot to do it. Go, they will save you every single time. Also, quick shout out to Olympia Coffee. I think they're doing a really sweet operation here in the corner building. This is another historic structure, and this, if you look at the historic photos of it, it looks exactly the same. Like, this is just a slice of time that has been preserved here, and it has been used for a variety of retail over time. We're going to come back here to the Blue Mouse in a second, but first I want to take you guys quickly down to the Gamble building. Here it is, fulfilling its destiny of being a multi-use space. When this building was constructed, it was designed to have apartments on top. I forget precisely how many in there, but I think it was something like 40 apartments on the upper level up there, and then retail on the bottom section there. And it was designed to be an anchor to the community, to promote the economy, but to give people an affordable place to live as well. And it's still doing a fantastic job of that. And it's named for its patron, Mr. Ray Gamble. So Ray Gamble got his start picking strawberries in Arizona as a child, and he had a field boss one day who just on a whim decided to show him a magic trick where he made a quarter appear out of thin air, and Mr. Young Little Gamble got obsessed. So there's all these stories of him saving up all his money to buy the Howard Thurston Book of Magic. And then later, he really developed this interest in sleight of hand and like stage magic, and continued his career as a professional magician throughout the remainder of his life. What was wicked interesting about that, though, is that it wasn't his stage career as a magician that propelled him to be a millionaire, believe it or not. It was the fact that he developed a sawdust containment system for dynamite. He used the sawdust chemical layer to create essentially a dampening unit that made dynamite safer to be handled and transported, but also acted as an accelerant so that as soon as you did light it and it exploded, it was a much larger event. And he sold that to a DuPont company that gave him millions of dollars for it, and he took that money, invested it in real estate, and really advanced his career. If you are familiar with the Stadium District, you'll have seen the other Gamble building. This is the Casablanca apartment building, and what I love about it is that from a similar time period as the other Gamble building, you can see it's got that same just strange brick facade that you don't really see on a ton of buildings. The Casablanca apartment building is super cool, and if you were on our underground Tacoma tour yesterday, you've already seen this. But Gamble came home from his world travels. Here he is, pictured being a rich, sweet dude. And he brought back all these colorful mosaic tiles, statues, and trophies from around the world, and then installed them in the remodeled basement of Casablanca apartment building. So if you go to the apartments today, this is the whimsical, slightly nightmarish, but overall fascinating basement scene that you would be encountering. It also had quite a bit of neon in it originally, so the glass-tiled column at the back of this photo used to have several neon tubes inside that would illuminate the hallway, and I'm sure it really depends where you are on neon and installed clown clocks, but this basement could either be like a dream or a nightmare. But I won't do any jump scares tonight. I'm on my best behavior since we are representing historic Tacoma tonight. I promise. So the Gamble building has existed in downtown Proctor. It has maintained its rich historical integrity down there and served the community even to this day. And it has the distinct pleasure of being next door to another one of my favorite buildings, which we're going to take you back to just now. We flew past it a second ago. Not New Era. But the Blue Mouse Theater. The Blue Mouse, I think, gets confused a lot of the time because there were two Blue Mouse theaters in Tacoma. The first one was downtown Tacoma, sort of near the Rialto and the Pantages in the original theater district there, and they demolished it to make way for the moving sidewalk. If you're not familiar with Tacoma's moving sidewalk, it's worth a Google. In the 1950s, 60s, there was a state-of-the-art moving sidewalk. It was a covered facility, and you could stand on it, kind of like the ones at an airport, like a mobile conveyor belt, and it would transport people up the very steep hill there. Anyone who's in the Tacoma area, not watching this from afar, you're already acquainted with the hills of Tacoma. For those of you who are not in the area, they're steep. They are wicked steep hills, and there used to be a cable car that ran up 11th Street and was actually towed by a massive steam-powered cable system down on the waterfront. And when that went away, they were like, what do we do to make people want to shop in our places? And the elegant solution was a moving sidewalk. Unfortunately, that meant the demise of the other Blue Mouse Theater, but the one that is located in the Proctor neighborhood is also original. It was opened for the first time ever on November 13th in 1923 and previewed the Green Goddess. And as a 420-seat theater with this sort of utilitarian but very unique and charming architecture style, it was the perfect anchor to the area. People swarmed it, and they loved it. And it has operated as a theater basically ever since. It's gone through some changes over time, but it has maintained itself as a live stage and movie theater. It has converted since its opening to a digital theater now today, and still offers really affordable prices and really sweet features. For a brief period of time, it was the Bijou Theater, pictured here. I forget which time period this was, but I think that might have been, 1980s. I think 1980s it became the Bijou Theater. And here's an original of that early 1920s Blue Mouse Theater down there. They do probably the finest production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show in Tacoma, if you're looking for an eclectic taste for that. Also, just on the weird off chance that anyone in our audience tonight hasn't gone to a live showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you've got to do that. Like, that should be something on your list of things to do. To clarify, it's not a live production of the Rocky Horror being performed. They play the movie on a screen, but people come dressed as characters from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. There's call and response. It's a big deal. It's a rite of passage, and it's something that I made my 18-year-old brother do when he turned 18. It was very humiliating for him and fantastic for me, as all experiences as the older brother should be. So the Blue Mouse, we're lucky to still have it in the Proctor area. It is on the Historic Registrar and is great to have something this beautiful still preserved, but it wouldn't be an efficient or wonderful walking tour of the area if we didn't at least stop at the Blue Mouse and tell you a little about it. Also, it's just right down the street. Basically, every building here. So this is Viva that we were looking at earlier. This was that hardware store where Yogi Jorgensen stopped in. You can see it is very much the same facade. I'll see if I can bring that historic photo up for you really quick so that you can see what we're dealing with here. Boom. So yeah, this is the original Lang hardware store right there, and it is the exact same facade that we get to experience when we're looking at the map on the street down there today. So we're lucky to still have that. It is eligible for historic preservation and should be a campaign, in my opinion, that we pursue pretty aggressively, because it's a sweet building, and it's on this cool anchor here, where we have this building here. This, if you're not familiar with it, is currently Teaching Toys. This building was first built as a Leonard Hardware building in 1918. It was then an Auto Drum Hardware until the 1930s. And then by 1935, it became my personal favorite, Jack's Lunch, which is what I get to show you guys right now. Where are we? Here we go. So there's the building as you get to experience it with Teaching Toys, which is a cool children's store. They do a lot of like experiential, education-based, but it's just wicked fun toys in there. This is Jack's Lunch from the 1930s. And it was opened by John, or Jack, as he was known to be liked to call. I don't know what I just said there. Jack Bolton. Let's just leave it at that. And Jack Bolton was the owner-operator of this, and he was very famous for having his restaurant be home of the world's largest hot dog. Now, before you ask, I don't know how big the world's largest hot dog was. I've tried to research it. If anyone has any information, this is how we opened ourselves up to trolls. If anyone has any information on how large the world's largest hot dog was at Jack's there, please let me know. Inquiring minds would love to be able to put it all over the internet, and so now you know. It operated for quite a period of time as that, and then Jack was so successful that he opened up next door North End Tavern, and then the Steakhouse as well. And so North End Tavern had new owners to it, and the subsequent owners for the Steakhouse, which was right next door here, and the staff pictured here, just lived on top of the building, which was pretty handy. I think it would be nice to be able to just go upstairs to live and then come back downstairs to work. So here, we're going to take you guys now a little bit farther down the street. I want to show you some more of the Proctor Street itself, and in particular, a pretty cool historic home down there. I'm glad we got to show you the parishioner housing across kitty corner from the Mason Methodist Church, because it's one of the larger homes in the area, and I think has a cool style to it. But we're going to take you now back to the digital map, so you can put your quick walking feet on really quick. And we're going to go down the street a little bit farther. You can see just down the corner there another one of the Salmon statues right there, as well as the original Proctor Neighborhood street clock here. This is one of the few remaining street clocks in the city of Tacoma that is maintained by volunteers, right next to the Rose Garden here. This is like a volunteer section. Also the area where the Proctor Farmers Market is, straight down 27th here. Next to Pacific Northwest Shop, which is T-Town Apparel currently. They're doing some sweet, sweet stuff there, supporting local businesses. But the clock is all volunteer maintained and still very, very sweet. So if you're downtown, I always recommend taking a look at it. Right down here on the corner, this is 2717 North Proctor. It was built for the manager of the Pacific Coast Merchant Company back in 1907, a guy named Frank Pittman, and operated as essentially a private establishment until it got turned into a restaurant in the 1970s, 1975, I think. And it's really perfect for it because, see if I can give you a 3D view of it. It's got that massive, it's like an entire section of the home is just a bay window with this outdoor patio there. It's currently one of my favorite puns in the city at Tacoma Yoga. So good. And then has that sweet solarium installed on the front there. So, you know, as I've already mentioned, my obsession with natural light. This is a really good example of it, and it's right next door to the Gamble building, which currently has Knapp's restaurant inside, which is another personal favorite in the Proctor area, and certainly one worth checking out as soon as things are opened up again. So I'm going to take you guys just briefly down the street a little bit more, because I want to give you sort of an overview of the Proctor neighborhood in case you're still sort of confused at what the entire thing encompasses here. Because I think that's the number one question we get from people, is what actually comprises Proctor. So here we go. So if you're looking at the map here, sort of kind of from the Cushman substation building down through the Puget Creek natural area, and it sort of forms an L. And obviously Proctor Street, North Proctor Street here, is the main arterial to that area, and it encompasses Mason Middle School and Washington Elementary down there, with hands down the hub of it being the Wheelock Library building, which, if I can fly into it here, is located right there. So this takes you back to our original starting location, and is where I'm gonna transition you guys briefly to one of my last favorite things I'm gonna say about this district here. So we've mentioned the historic icons that have come out of it, like Yogi Jorgensen, world-renowned archer Sonny John, reaching his fame at the impressionable age of 13, as well as John G. Proctor, who, while he didn't actually live in the Proctor neighborhood, contributed significantly to it. You could also make the same case for Alan Mason, who spent the majority of his time actually developing Old Town Tacoma, thinking that was going to be the big economic hub, but losing out on all of that and having his actual lasting legacy be a lot of the infrastructure that he installed here in the Proctor neighborhood. And I think that is my fundamental takeaway from the Proctor neighborhood, is that while it doesn't have the same grandeur of structures as like downtown Tacoma or the massive mansions of like a North Slope sort of experience or the industrial gritty feel of South Tacoma, it is one of the most important and central neighborhoods, not just geographically, but in the greater story of Tacoma. So many of the major players have contributed their time and like off-clock resources and lives to developing the community in the Proctor area, and it is certainly worthy of preservation. And I fully commend the exemplary efforts of Historic Tacoma in cataloging that and trying to bring that story to life for people living there now and preserve that area from being erased for something else. So I'm very excited to have been a part of this project, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed this tour tonight. If you're interested in contributing to further research on this or getting involved, historictacoma.org. I'll put the link in the comments below there. I know that a few of the members of Historic Tacoma have been a part of our tour tonight and gotten an opportunity to sort of comment back and forth with people, and I hope that they will continue that dialogue with you all. If you have any further questions about this tour or further experiences with it, please let me know. It is a tour that we will be conducting again, hopefully as an in-person walking tour next time, but the future is unknowable, even to Yogi Jorgensen. So if we are going to do this as a virtual tour again in July, we're going to make sure that we add even more media decks to it and hopefully a few interviews with people pivotal to the area, or people that have contributed to the history of it. There is an just over 80-page document, if anyone's interested, that compiles the historic research that Historic Tacoma has done of the Proctor neighborhood. You can speak to them about it. I know that they are anxious to preserve and expand the history of that area, so please let them know what you're interested in, and look at that watch list on historictacoma.org. It has a ton of really good information on buildings in the area that have been threatened, and not just Proctor, but throughout all of the greater Tacoma area. So with that, I want to thank you guys for your patience tonight, coming back and joining us on this exciting journey. And like I mentioned earlier, this next week, I'm taking off to spend time with my kids as they turn 2 and 4, and then I'll be back with you all this coming Saturday for our new launch of tours, from Cemetery Tours and beyond. But thank you guys for joining me, and thank you, Historic Tacoma, for letting me be a part of this exciting project. I will see you guys all soon. Thank you very much. I'm Chris Staudinger. Keep on exploring.